We recognize that CVUUS gathers on land seized from the Western Abenaki people by European colonizers. We respect the Abenaki's spiritual relationship to the land and waters of the Champlain Valley. We are committed to building a peaceful and more just relationship with them and to promoting knowledge about their history and culture. Good morning. My name is Abby Sessions, and I am a member of this congregation and a member of the worship team. I say, welcome to you, old friends and new, young and old, in person and remote. You are an essential part of our worship here today at the Champlain Valley Unitarian Universalist Society. How's that, Steve? Whether today is your first, your 10th, or your 1000th Sunday in our midst, we are stronger because you are with us. We are one people of many beliefs, many origins, and many ways of being. We are all growing, all learning, all striving to make the world a more just and compassionate place. Just as you are welcome here. I would like to draw your attention to the seasonal decorations of a kind of special nature provided to us by our flower co-op, Marnie Wood, Dinah Smith, and Barbie Carnwath. They have made a statement about these hedgerows on either side of the sanctuary, which I believe we will become well acquainted with in the next few weeks. This is what they said. This week, after being reminded by Reverend Barnaby that we are just 40 days away from one of the few specially designated days of the year that are celebrated worldwide, the Flower Co-op has installed a tribute to Earth Day in the sanctuary. Here in Vermont, Earth Day, they say, comes at an auspicious time, the end of stick season, the middle of mud season, and this year exactly 1 week before Arbor Day. The cuttings, the sticks, that now flank the sanctuary like hedgerows will, over the next few weeks, sprout leaves and flowers and roots so that in the end they may be ready to plant in the ground when mud season rolls or oozes around in a few weeks. We hope that you will enjoy watching closely as the hedgerows in the sanctuary and in the countryside spring to life as we look forward to Earth Day. Further, they say, the Flower Co-op says, we anticipate that there might be some curiosity in the congregation concerning the identity of the 9 species of sticks. I guess 9 containers and 9 species of sticks. Get it? That we have chosen for this installation, and we are prepared to make this information available in some as yet undetermined way. So stay tuned. In addition to the hedgerows they've provided, the Flower Co-op will continue to provide blue and yellow arrangements around the sanctuary in solidarity with the Ukrainian people. We are an active congregation where members deepen our relationships by pursuing activities in the community which reflect our values. The many opportunities for connection are listed in the weekly blast, published by our office manager, Laura Asermely, on Wednesdays, and in your order of service. We have begun hosting a social hour after the service in the Ann Ross Fellowship Hall downstairs. You're all invited. If you're on Zoom, there will be a Zoom social hour as well, hosted by Richard Hopkins. Special thanks to Alan Moore and Mike Greenwood for making our in-person social hour happen. Thanks also to our tech team, Margie Young, Richard Hopkins, and the usher greeter team of Mike Greenwood and Avi Freund. And thanks to Priscilla Bremser for her forthcoming testimonial. It is Stewardship Sunday, one of our several Stewardship Sundays. And Mary Hadley is set up in the lobby to receive your pledge online at her station there behind Margie at the tech station. So consider making your pledge today, get it done, get it recorded. If this is your first time attending a service with us, we'd be happy if you signed our virtual guest book in the chat, if you are remote, or the actual guest book in the lobby. For those of you with us in the sanctuary, this would be an excellent time to turn off your cell phones. And now for our call to worship. Written by Seth Carrier-Ladd. Wind that whispers through the willow trees, sun that sustains us, water that washes over willing earth and weathered stones, a smile shared and savored, a child's squeal of delight as she dances in the daisies and daffodils, the quiet joy of gathered community. This is the spirit of life and love that we call forth now into this gathering. May this spirit infuse our hearts, fill our souls, and carry us forward like a wave on the ocean as we enter now into this sacred time and space. Come, let us worship together. As Barnaby lights the chalice, please join us with the words that will appear on the screen. We light this chalice for the web of life which sustains us, for the sacred circle of life in which we have our being, for the earth, the sky, above and below, and for our Mother Earth, and for the mystery.
Thanks, choir. It's a total joy to have the choir here singing. I know someday you might not be on the side anymore, but I've actually kind of been into it. There's something nice about you taking that whole space. Anyway, I'm Poppy, the Director of Religious Exploration for the kids and youth, and I'm going to do the Time for All Ages. As many of you know, normally we have the kids in during this time. They stay in until the end of this piece, and then they go over next door, but we're not there quite yet because of COVID. We're just being really, really, probably overly careful, but we'll move back to that at some point. So the Time for All Ages I'm going to do for you, I actually kind of did last week for the kids in RE, and now I'm tweaking it a little bit and doing it for you. So this goes with the pictures on the screen. If you can't see them, you might consider moving closer. I think my words will still give you the basic story, but without the pictures, a lot is lost. And I'm interested to hear afterwards, during coffee hour, from anybody that has feedback about how it works to look at the screen and see the images and any of that. So, I just want to make sure that I can see enough. Okay, so last week we talked to the kids about the situation in Ukraine. We had very little kids in this space, so I'm going to say to you what I said to them, which is pretty edited for young ears, and people sensitive like you. So what I said was, there's a place very far away across the world, and there's a country named Ukraine, and in it there are a lot of families and people and kids like you. So this is a picture that's a school picture. They're standing in front of a school, and I don't know if it's first day, last day, some special day, but I don't know if you can see, they're totally covered with like awards and garlands and all these fancy things. Next, another picture of kids from Ukraine. Next. So, Ukraine is next to another country called Russia. The government of Russia has decided that it wants to take Ukraine over, so it is trying to do that. And it's fighting with them to try to get it. So a lot of families, including kids, have left Ukraine because they don't feel like it's safe for them anymore. So they've left and gone to other countries to stay safe, and they're hoping they'll be able to come home at some point. And a lot of the kids and families had to walk. There were cars, but at some point people ran out of gas, or there weren't enough cars, or the cars were too long. But there's many cities where people don't have cars at all. They just take the train and buses. So this is a picture of people. You can see kind of a line of people walking to the border with Poland, which is the country next door. And they pretty much could only take whatever they could carry or pull or push. So there's a stroller, there's a dog, I think that's a dog. People who were lucky had rolling suitcases. I saw a picture in the paper of somebody carrying a very large dog on their shoulders because the dog got sick of walking. If you've ever had pets or children, you probably are familiar with this reality. Next. These are kids, so this is when people got to the border and got over, so they're now in a safe spot, and they're waiting. They're waiting to figure out where their families are going to go, and how they're going to get there. They're going to stay with other families or, help centers. So just a big group of kids, they're waiting. Next. So here's a picture, and does anybody notice, is there anything that strikes you about this picture? Did you say the colors? What about the colors? They're the colors of the Ukrainian flag, right, blue and yellow. There seem to be a lot of cats. Next. So, last week, when this was all happening, and I was thinking about the kids in Ukraine and trying to think of how to help, and feeling very far away and very powerless, I was trying to figure out things I could do, because there's always something we can do, even if it is very small. And we should try to find something to do, even if it is very small. So I heard about this idea that you could go to the website Etsy, which is what you're looking at, a website where people usually sell things that they've made, and filter it so that it shows you things made by people in Ukraine, and then buy something. The benefit of that is that the money immediately gets to that person or family. There's not a delay, so it's a way to immediately get money to people in Ukraine. So I went and did that, and everything I was seeing was, oh, and you can either order something that you know you're never going to get, right? You know, some fancy ornament that will probably never get to you for years, or something digital that you can print out. So I looked at digital stuff, and it was all like, I don't know, it looked very computery, and I didn't really care even about getting anything. I just wanted to give money, but somehow it just wasn't doing it, till I saw this page of all this art, obviously by kids. And it was just so great. It just really struck me. So I decided I wanted to buy some of this. So I ended up buying and printing out 4 pictures, which are now on the wall in the Fen Chapel. So if you go over there, you can see them, and there's a picture that says, "Side with Ukraine." So I did that, and I sent the money, and one of the things that was great was it had been a mom who'd had this website who did paintings, but she had a daughter named Sophia, who she said had decided she wanted to help, and she loves cats. Literally, like, every picture is basically a cat. There's like one picture of a boat and then like 400 cat pictures. So she made all these pictures, and she did them in Ukrainian colors, and there's a lot of hearts and cats, basically. And next. A cat with a flag and hearts. Next. And this is Sophia. So there was a picture of her. So the kids talked about that. I mean, it's such an amazing thing, right? Here's this kid, just like, I could point to somebody in the room, who was over there in her house, sitting on her couch. They hadn't left yet. She made some pictures. Her mom stuck them on the computer, and now we, in Vermont, in the United States, bought them, and we printed them out, and we have them hanging on our wall, just like Sophia's mom has some of them hanging above Sophia's bed in her bedroom. And I just thought, what a cool thing. It really shows how interconnected we are. And next. And some of the pictures that Sophia's even holding are the ones that I tried to print out, the ones that she's holding, so you can really see, the kids didn't think I was just making this all up. They could see, here's this kid, and here's the art. Next. Seeing Sophia really changed something for me with Ukraine. I mean, I already was having my heart broken, and yet it was that war very far away. I'm safe here. I felt very distant from it, even though I cared. But the process of going through this and reading the mom's note and seeing the pictures of Sophia and printing out the stuff, and it's like, I remember my daughter Callie went through a phase of drawing like cats. I just really felt a personal connection, and even though it actually made it more painful for me after that, like, it's been really hard because now I'm thinking about Sophia and wondering where she is and how she is. I think it's actually good for me to feel the realness of it and feel the connection, and be reminded in a very heart way that those kids are kids. They're all our kids, right? This is a girl named Diana who goes to the high school She came to a vigil here last week. And she's an exchange student from Ukraine. So I was thinking about her too. So I wanted to do something more with the kids besides just show them the art. And I thought it would be kind of cool to do something that Deanna, who maybe goes on this road to school, might see. Next. So I was thinking about that. I was noticing how much sunflowers were starting to pop up in videos and tweets, little sunflowers, and at protests. So that's a photo of that. Next. Another picture of a protest. Next. This is Ukraine. They have tons of sunflowers. They are one of the biggest producers of sunflower oil in the world. So sunflowers are not only like a big part of what they eat and cook and use, but they've been a symbol of peace in that country for decades. They already were. So when the war started, this thing that was a symbol of peace for Ukraine moved outside the borders all over the world, so that everybody now is starting, not everybody, but like all over the world, people are starting to use the sunflower as a symbol of my heart is with Ukraine, we're fighting Ukraine, we want peace, we're against the war. Next. Talk to the kids about protesting as another way to do something. Sometimes you really have nothing you can do physically, especially as a kid. You can't go there, you can't give them something into their hands, but we practically always, especially in this country, can speak out. So if you can, you should at least do that. So here's a huge protest. This was in Germany, in Berlin. Next. This is in Vermont. This was near the beginnings. I mean, there have been bigger gatherings since then, but this was a hardy group, I think, in Burlington. Next. So we had this idea to make sunflowers. You may have seen some of them as you came in. I can't remember where I put them. Is there one over there? Yeah. So there we are last week making some sunflowers. Next. Next. And we put them up in the front window of Fenn. There's an additional sign, which if I'd been really on it, I would have taken an updated picture, but there's a sign now above the flowers that says for Ukraine, yellow and blue. Next. That's on the side of Fenn, so that's really for you. I don't think Deanna will see that, but next. So I want to leave you, this is just Sophia again. I want to leave you with this thought. Number one, I think there's always something that we can do. Even if it is small, even if it is just showing support, even if it is just speaking out. Number two, we have all experienced what it is like to be overwhelmed with the pain of the world, of the reality of, of seeing wars and all of the suffering that happens, especially in places where we can't do anything. And it can feel really hard to just keep going. It can also feel like, what does it even matter if I do something? It's like so big. I think it does matter, even if all you're doing is putting sunflowers in a window, because Deanna might see them. That's one person. We are reminded that we have an opportunity to put love out and send a message of support out. I think it keeps our hearts open, which is hard and necessary. And I would encourage people, if you can handle it, and sometimes you just really can't. Sometimes you need to even just not look at the news, and I get it. If your heart can handle it, I encourage you to hold a little bit of something personal about Ukraine, or about whatever it is that you're thinking about in your heart, right? I mean, it might be homeless people or people who need food somewhere, because it changes it for us. It changes how it feels for us and makes it more urgent. And it actually made me feel more hopeful. Instead of making me feel worse, I mean, I followed the story a little bit. I'm now like watching Sophia's mom's YouTube videos in Ukrainian, which I'm pushing through Google Translate and seeing, like, you can do this thing on the computer where she speaks Ukrainian and they translate it into Russian and they translate it into the English. It's really terrible. I mean, I don't actually recommend this, but I did find out from it that they were living in Kyiv, a very big city. They got out pretty early. They got to leave. I don't know how. Leave, which is very near the border of Poland. And she's trying to decide now if they're going to keep going. But their whole family got out. Her parents, Sophia has a brother. And that gives me hope. I don't know. So that's what I leave you with is there's always some hope, even in the face of suffering, and there's always something you can do, even if it's small. So thanks.
Thank you, Poppy. I can fill you in about Diana, because she and Masha, the other person who came to the vigil, who just graduated from Middlebury, came to our house for dinner Friday night. So I'll talk to you later about that. This is the time in the order of service when we have an offering, and we will be, in May, thinking about how we can share that offering with Ukraine. For now, we're sharing that offering with Planned Parenthood of Middlebury, because reproductive justice is very much being threatened in many places in this country, and Vermont is working on protecting reproductive freedom. And the front lines of that battle in this state are Planned Parenthood, and we're fortunate enough to have an office in Addison County. And Ashley, who is a member of the congregation, spoke last week. She works there, but I want to just invite us to be as generous as we're able in continuing to support Planned Parenthood this month. For those of you who are here during the music, you can leave an offering in the basket, or you can do it online through the indicator in your program. And for folks at home, it's the same as it's been for the last 2 years. So, thank you.
Good morning. I'm Priscilla, and I am a member of the board here at CVUUS. By now, most members and friends of CVUUS have received the Canvas brochure, including the fabulous Ripple graphic conceived and designed by Hannah Sessions. You'll notice that we're hoping to bring in a pledge total of $295,000 or so, which represents an increase of about 8.7% in the total budget. Since personnel expenditures make up about 63% of that budget, I'd like to share some thoughts on why I enthusiastically support an increase in compensation for our wonderful employees. First, I want CVUUS to be a good employer. The UUA has compensation guidelines to help us do just that, and our finance team consults those guidelines in preparing budgets. Second, our employees really are wonderful. Here are some brief glimpses into what they do to support our faith community. I'm going alphabetically by first name because why not? So that means Barnaby Feeder, our minister, comes first. We are all aware of the remarkable job Barnaby has done in keeping CVUUS on an even keel throughout the pandemic. There are also less visible aspects of his job, especially pastoral care. Phone calls, home visits, and hospital visits are essential things Barnaby does, but seldom mentions except briefly during his monthly reports to the board. Keith Rickerby, our sexton. Before the memorial service for Jim Ross, I was standing at the foot of Duane Court over there, explaining to people who had never been here before that they should turn around and go park at the high school. I realized that I needed a reflective vest to look more official, and Keith lent me his right off his back. He does a lot more than clean this building. Chris Butler, our bookkeeper. I get an automatic email from Chris every time I make a donation using the QR code, which I love to do for some reason. It's just so magic. I could explain the math about it if you want. What I've learned from our treasurer is that Chris has been instrumental in implementing the Breeze data management platform that makes those donations possible. This year, you have the option of making a sustaining pledge. It turns out that it's not trivial to program that into the Breeze system, and Chris is working with our finance people to make it work. Laura Asermoli, our office manager. Laura puts together our newsletter and the weekly email blast and the order of service and the directory and a bunch of other stuff. What you might not know is how good she is at anticipating needs. She's often a step or two ahead of everyone else. For just one example, as the board was fleshing out Hannah's Ripples theme, Laura popped into the email thread to give us all the necessary details about printing and mailing before we were even aware that we should be thinking about that. Poppy Reese, our Director of Religious Exploration. Poppy's superhuman creativity has been sorely tested over the past couple of years, but she has come through on behalf of our families with children. We've all enjoyed her storytelling skills and her beautiful homilies on Zoom, and I welcome her singing anytime. However, if you did not attend her online Will It Waffle event on February 12th, you really missed out. The Great British Baking Show has nothing on Poppy's hosting skills. I always like CVUUS events where I get to hang out with kids, and this one was a blast. I can't say I'll cook a quesadilla in a waffle iron ever again, but it was fun to try. Ronnie Romano, our Director of Music, who would be last in either configuration, so sorry. Ronnie shares many of his impressive talents during worship services. Last week, we all learned that he can also recruit excellent guest musicians. To really appreciate Ronnie, though, you have to join the choir. I learned something, and I laugh a lot at every rehearsal. The warm-ups alone are worth the trip to church. It turns out that they're not just for warming up our vocal cords, they're also for training our ears and our brains, even when he has us sing "Meow" over and over, as he did last Wednesday. I also appreciate the care that Ronnie brings to choosing music for us to sing, along with his skill at teaching it to us. Really, you have to join the choir. You can make your pledge by going to cvuus.org and clicking on the Canvas fundraising campaign link just above the Ripple photo. From there, you can go to the Breeze form and make your pledge. In addition to a sustaining pledge option, you can choose a "We've Still Got You Covered" one-time pledge if you are feeling able to give a little extra on behalf of those who've been hit particularly hard by the pandemic or other challenges. You'll also have a chance to put in 3 words that you think of in relation to CVUUS. Mary Hadley has set up this word cloud based on those responses, and we'll watch it evolve over the next couple of weeks. So if you want one of those words to look bigger, then you put that word in. If you'd prefer a paper pledge form, reach out to Laura Asermely, or maybe she'll reach out to you first. You never know.
Thank you, Priscilla. This has been an odd year for this canvas because we didn't have an overall chairperson or chair couples in the past, and the board has stepped up to do that collectively. It's been a very interesting process to watch because underneath it all is a great deep love for the congregation, which I feel coming back every time there's a pledge, no matter what size it is. We also experience that love for the congregation when we share our milestones, and it's I have the usual mix of milestones to share today. I want to start with John Barstow and Kate Gridley are thrilled to announce the marriage of their son Charles to his partner of 7.5 years, Julia Negreto. That was a small ceremony that took place yesterday in Tucson, Arizona, and we got a picture of it right after the ceremony, and I wanted to point out that they are standing on a rug. Charles's brother Angus was both the ring bearer and the rug bearer because he brought out from here a rug. And it's a tradition in this family that whenever someone gets married, they get married on a rug. And whenever there is a big decision to be made, an argument to be held, a new baby to welcome home, or whatever life decides to throw at them, they go back to the rug and remember just how it all began. And you could see John and Kate's rug just as you go into their house, and now Charles and Julia have their rug. So it's with great joy that we mark their marriage, and also we get to see a picture of it in Tucson. I wanted to share, Poppy left me a yellow card before she went back to Fenn, and she says she's thinking especially of the people trapped in Mariupol, which is a city in eastern Ukraine, which has been surrounded and is being bombarded daily, and she's hoping that some relief trucks can get to the citizens who are there, who are out of food and a lot of other things at this point. One of many hard stories from Ukraine. I also have a card from Jess Danielle, and she says this past Friday afternoon, and on the 11th, they held a simple green burial in North Hero for her husband Greg, and India, their daughter, wrote and read a poem for him. Friends who had become like family during the last month, there was a handmade casket, an overcast sky, lots of laughter, bright daffodils, and good music that made for a fitting fare thee well. Jess, thank you for sharing this. We know this was a big transitional moment, and there'll be many more. This is not something that ends quickly, and we'll be here for you every step of the way. And finally, I want to introduce to you someone most of you don't know, Justin Doran, who stands there in the back. Justin is here for the milestone starting last Sunday of a project I told you about at Middlebury College, memorializing all of the people who've died trying to cross the border from Mexico into the United States. And that project is an ongoing event with movies and other kinds of ways of participating. And I said to Justin, one way we could participate is helping that project to grow. If Justin can hold up, one of the artworks at the college is a toe tag being filled in with the name of every person who's died. And there's going to be more toe tags filled in because the initial phase of the project only went up to 2,000. And he has some postcards that will tell you more about the project. So at coffee hour, I'd like to invite you all to go meet Justin and learn a little bit about how we at CVUUS can be part of the next milestones in this project. When we do milestones and passages, we always have a short time of silence to get in touch with what's on our hearts personally. I want to lead you into this silence with a little prayer I wrote that refers to the hymn that will bring you out of the silence, for the earth forever turning. Soon we will hear singing, and our hearts, I pray, will sing along for the sun, for rain and thunder, for the seasons' harmony, for our lives, for all creation, in joyful praise of Thee. Until then, during the singing, and when it ends, may the diversity and mystery of the Thees among us fill us with the spirit of life-giving love.
Our ancient reading today is excerpted from Psalm 8 in the Hebrew portion of the Bible. It is a prayer of praise to God attributed to King David. When I look at your heavens, the work of your fingers, the moon and stars that you have established, what are human beings that you are mindful of them? Mortals, that you care for them. Yet you have made them a little lower than God and crowned them with glory and honor. You have given them dominion over the works of your hands. You have put all things under their feet, all sheep and oxen, and also the beasts of the field, the birds of the air, and the fish of the sea, whatever passes along the paths of the seas. Our modern reading is excerpted from a reflection by Reverend Jake Morrill, longtime minister at the UU congregation in Oak Ridge, Tennessee. He calls it Singing Out for Love's Return. It was inspired by his anxious, unsuccessful search in the woods for his usually reliable dog when she disappeared during their daily walk. For Christians, Lent is a wilderness time, a time when it's not clear how or if love will win in the end, a time to ponder love's elusiveness, its absence. I've known times when I've wandered bereft. Maybe you have as well. What if love wasn't a far porch light toward which we had to trudge? What if it was a wild goose, a wet dog? Instead of some grim pursuit, in our desire to meet it, we'd be compelled to sing out, to invite, to entice it. In the end, Daisy returned, very pleased with herself. But before, in the woods, when I thought she was gone, all I knew was my part, to sing out her name.
So Lent has been on my mind. One of the reasons we had 75 people for our vigil on the 2nd instead of maybe 90 or 100 was that a couple of the Christian churches in town were celebrating Lent. It was Ash Wednesday, the first day of Lent, and they had services, and even though their hearts were with us, they couldn't be here at the vigil. And it got me thinking. We in the Congregational Church are siblings historically. We descend from the Puritans. The Unitarians were the liberal breakaway group from that Puritan heritage. And I wondered how it was that they ended up with Lent, because the Puritans didn't celebrate Lent. They didn't believe in any man-made holidays. They didn't even like Christmas. And somehow we ended up on the staying with the Puritan tradition, and the Congregationalists added on Lent, which is the reverse of what usually happened. We usually left the Puritan tradition, and they kept pieces of it. And it got me thinking a little bit more about this. You can't find any mention of Lent in the famous early Unitarians, Emerson, Thoreau, Parker. They never talk about Lent. But as UUs, we're interested in other traditions, and that's why we send our children out on neighboring faiths as one of our curriculum units to study other religions. And naturally, a lot of UUs have kept coming back to this idea of Lent, this 40 days leading up to Easter. It's actually 47 days because they don't count the Sundays. And because that's the Sabbath. And it turns out that UUs have wrestled with Lent in many ways. One of the most distinctive ways that I wanted to call your attention to this morning was invented by a UU named Barb Grieve, Mr. Barb Grieve. Now, Mr. Barb Grieve is a very interesting person to have invented this, one of our more marginalized ministers in many ways. Barb Grieve was born as Barbara and grew up as a baby in the Framingham Unitarian Universalist congregation in Massachusetts, transitioned to male gender identity in 1995, but did not conform to all the expressions of being male and kept the name Barb, which deliberately confused a lot, or seemed to deliberately confuse a lot of people about what their identity was. And in a 1998 sermon, Courage from Necessity, Barb concluded, "My journey is not about transitioning into one of two acceptable genders. My journey is not about making some great political statement. Rather, my journey is about becoming a whole person. It is about being the best person I can learn to be. That is what leads me to live as a transgender guy named Barb." So Barb was already a marginalized person and ready to think about Lent in a marginalized kind of way. And in 2016, working with a couple of friends, Barb created a different kind of Lent calendar. And I'm gonna, you can't see this, but this is a whole month of Lent. And for each day, it's called #UU Lent, and it started in 2016. And for each day, there's a different word. So, for instance, the first day of Lent this year, of the UU Lent, the word was reflection. The second day was soil. The third day was breathe. The fourth day was vulnerability. The previous year, those same 4 days had been holy, earth, move, and grace. And on Sundays, the days that are excluded from the 40 days count of Lent, they have a word as well. And in addition to doing what you do the other days, which is simply to write something or post a picture that reflects that word for you, you actually do something that reflects that word for you. So for instance, this year, the first Sunday of Lent, the word was hospitality, and the word today is help. And so if you were following this UU Lent that Barb created, Reverend Barb, you would be trying to think of not just something that visualized help for you or put it into words, but you would do something. And that would be the Lent observation. So in 2016, Barb explained what was going on. As Unitarian Universalists, we share theological roots with our Christian siblings who observe Lent from Ash Wednesday until Easter. However, rather than practice self-denial, we offer this opportunity to spend the season of Lent engaged in a spiritual discipline of deep intention and appreciation of our world, our place in it, and an openness to grace in our lives. That's the purpose of the words, to help people day by day do two things, two interrelated things: get into a space of deep attention and get into a space of deep appreciation. And you do those two things about three things: our world, our place in it, and an openness to grace. So, and then in this 2016 writing, he explained what they would do. On Sundays throughout the Lent, they challenge ourselves to not only reflect on the given word, but to enact it. And on the other days, you're reflecting through creating images of reflections. And they have a website, and these things pop up for people who around the country are participating. So I think this is a very interesting UU way to do Lent. But this year, because I won't be here for Earth Day, and I happen to notice that this Sunday is 40 days until Earth Day, I started thinking, what if we did a UU Lent that was really oriented towards deep intention and appreciation of our relationship to Earth? And what if our Lent sprang directly from Earth Day, not just from a generalized need to understand a loving way to do Easter, rather than a focus on suffering that leads to a different view of renewal. And as I thought about it, I thought, well, what would be a way I would express to you how this might come to be in your lives? That we would need a bunch of specific things to be doing on the 40 days, and what might that look like? And I just want to put out there that the nature of our problem of sustainability and our relationship to the world is so deep and so plugged into every single form of injustice and oppression and dislocation that we experience, and so deeply plugged into every joy that we experience, that the issue is not going to be coming up with specific things that, if you pay attention to them for a minute, won't make you feel more deeply connected. I'll just give you a few simple examples from just one day. They all popped up the same day. There was an article in the Addison Independent responding to a previous article, a debate about, can we harvest woods? Is that ecologically sustainable? Is that a bad thing to be doing, cutting down trees? And the response to the first article talked about all the different ways that that first article had sort of oversimplified the problem. For instance, the idea that once you cut down a tree, all that carbon that's stored in that tree gets released back into the world, and you're contributing to carbon emissions. Well, the writer on the second day pointed out, well, that's true if you burn it to warm your house, but if you convert it into a house or into your furniture, most of that carbon stays stored in that wood that you're living with. And so all of these things are much more complicated. You could just think about harvesting forests for a day of your Lent practice and come closer to an understanding of how important sustainability and our relationship to Earth is. You could think about our flower arrangement, the way our flower co-op did. Marnie, you guys gathered on Friday, right? It didn't take a month and a half of planning to come up with this beautiful, beautiful, very important symbolic plan that all of us are going to enjoy for the rest of the time that we're leading up to Earth Day. Just thinking about it, getting deeply into it, opening it up to the spiritual dimensions. The same day, there was online the second meeting of the group in Addison County working on creating pollinator pathways, more gardens for bees. Another subject that is both practical in terms of helping our environment, but has deep implications for who we are, what our relationship is to our environment. And you know, these pollinator pathways, if we really get into it, are going to have their own complications. There's going to be more bee stings. And everybody thinking about, oh, I'm going to plant them all in my garden and attack pollinators. It won't always be the bees that create nests that you can see. There will be bees in the ground that people step on. And we know what happens when that occurs. So this will become another aspect of our complicated relationship with nature. The Ukraine isn't being discussed too much as an environmental disaster. It's a human disaster, but it is an environmental disaster because it's sending the world right back into heavier dependence on oil and gas at the exact time when we need to be making progress moving away from it. And you see people like Bill McKibben saying things like, you want to do something that's resistance related to Ukraine, buy a heat pump. Well, we don't actually have the infrastructure for everybody to buy a heat pump now. And a lot of us don't have the money, and a lot of us don't have the house that's particularly set up for it. So these are all complicated things that you can think about. Treatment of undocumented farm workers, even the questions of books being taken out of libraries. What do we teach about truth, and how does that relate to the environmental truths of what we're doing to the planet? So we're not going to run out of things to think about if you really want a 40-day practice leading up to Earth Day. As I was wrestling with this, my thoughts turned to philia. Now, a lot of you don't remember philia. Philia is an imaginary, I have to admit, saw-whet owl, inspired by the story of the owl that was caught in the Rockefeller Center Christmas tree and was rescued. And when that all happened, we did a service about that. And then a month later, I was out walking my dog Pan, and in my mind, this owl came back and we had a discussion, and this owl proved to be very, very smart. And we had a lot of discussion, and of course the owl was female and didn't like the name that the rescuers had given it. And so one of our discussions chose the name Philia, a form of love. Anyway, I've had trouble having conversations with Philia ever since my dog Pan had to be put down. And those of you who remember the conversations I shared, they always occurred when I was out walking Pan, even though Philia and Pan did not get along. They never had a relationship. But I found with Pan gone, I couldn't connect with Philia the same way. And the one time I've referred to Philia in a service since then was just reporting thinking about Philia rather than sharing with you a real dialogue. So when I was thinking about this practice, I really needed Philia, and we did have a conversation. I'm not going to reproduce the conversation as I have in the past, but what Philia and I spoke about as being important was having a different creation story than the one that's embodied in the Bible. That stewardship story in the Bible still centers man, still centers dominion over the earth, and is a strong contrast with a lot of the creation stories of indigenous people where there are many different animals involved. The human figures are not necessarily the smartest ones in these stories, and it emphasized the fact that if we're going to approach the earth problem that we're trying to approach through Lent, we need many more people we're talking to. And some of them should be imaginary animals that we need to keep in our lives. And if I had to sum up where that's all going, it comes back to what Jake Morrill said in his story when he's lost his dog. And he knew that all he could really do, his only part at that moment, was to sing out her name. That was his pathway to love. And if this 40 days is going to lead us anywhere, I don't think it leads to a resurrection through suffering. I think it leads us down that path that I spoke about when our High Holy Days sermon last September. I've always told you that the beauty of the Jewish High Holy Days is this idea that you have to get your relationships right with humanity before you're in a position to approach God and ask for mercy. And I think our 40 days of celebration can be the same kind of thing, an exercise in love in the right order to put us in a place where we can actually start making the world what it needs to be. And in that sermon last September, I used a quote from a Julia Alvarez novel where she talked about, the character talks about what her husband does when he is dealing with a situation that seems there's no way out. And he says, all I can do is think of what my mother used to say. She would wipe her hands on her apron and say, well, let's see what love can do. And that's the spirit that I would like to leave you with in making this suggestion about considering 40 days leading up to Earth Day as a period for thinking about your relationship with Earth and what you can do if you see what love can do about it. This is a big subject. I'm going to be talking more about it next week. I'm going to actually give you some more ideas about how it might work, but don't wait for me. Get started. Blessed be and amen. So we're going to invite everybody to sing Blue Boat Home. A lot of you are familiar with it, and sing along with the choir, but please keep your masks on. Till the college gets done with its wave of cases, and we know how many are floating around Addison County, we still need to be careful. The lyrics will be up here too on the screen. If you want to stand, you can stand, but don't belt it out. So one of the benefits of not passing out hymnals to you is that we don't confuse you when we change things. So the lyrics here were all made plural, because this battle we have to be in right relationship with the earth is something that we start individually, but we can only be successful in community. And I don't know how many of you noticed that, but this is a thing that starts with I, me, and only gets anywhere if it's we, us. And I invite you to go out this week with that in your heart, creating love, but also looking for it all around you because it's there, and together we can amplify it with all those ripples the campaign to raise pledge money is talking about. And I invite you downstairs to meet Justin to talk about how we can participate in this project, keeping in our hearts all the undocumented people who lost their lives trying to cross the border to save their lives. Blessed be.